justice levy and our library levies passed. For those of us who were around when the justice levy last went down, that was really tough stuff. So I'm glad that that's all behind us, and it's a reflection of the good work that this county has done and the trust that the voters have. And I'm also super delighted that the Metro housing bill passed. I think that's going to be a game changer for us, for this area. So that's about it. That's enough. Thank you.
Whereas we won't be traveling to WEFTEC in Louisiana this year, it's my understanding that they're still holding the conference, but it will be in more of a online and virtual conference. So you'll still have a new experience with WEFTEC this year. We'll all be going to that versus traveling by plane. We'll be traveling by electrons. So Diane and Mark are figuring out logistics for that. So continue to reserve that time on your calendar, because there are events that the team is setting up for us to participate in. That's in early October. Yep, great. Any other commissioners?
Sure, I'll go. Dick, thank you for your comments. It's been a great 20 years with you, and
Thank you.
We've seen a lot of things and done a lot of things together, and the county certainly has been the better for your involvement. Last week we had a HB 2017, it's TriMet meeting. Nothing too big to tell you about. We had JPAC, it's all virtual, and it's interesting seeing people in different venues. And I just want to spend a minute and tell you, because I know there's been some questions regarding the committee that's been established in regard to the COVID money that we received. And it has been a great committee in terms of people working very hard. It always seems to be an easy thing to do, but it's all what we call principle-based. And so we needed to, one, take a diverse group of people with lots of different directions they wanted to go, and come down to four basic principles of health, economy, support for community benefit organizations and nonprofits, and build support for the mental health organizations. And there's tons of sub-bullets underneath there. What makes it a little more difficult is when you start getting into percentages, and that's the proposal that'll come to this board and how it's been spent. At our last meeting, and I want to address both you, Commissioner Treese, and Commissioner Willie. I saw your letter, and we talked only very briefly about it. I have gotten since then probably a ton of messages like both of you have gotten, and I said some month or two ago that I could certainly invite a lot of people down in my neck of the woods to parade in here and tell you, you know, their businesses are on life support and don't even know if they're going to be back up again. So I certainly appreciate your request for $4 or $5 million, and as I said in that meeting, I'd support it today. I think that that's very modest for putting businesses on their knees. So I think that if you anticipated that we'd have it all worked out, we don't. I think the committee's working very hard to do that, but I want to tell you where I was on that particular issue.
Well, you haven't said congratulations, by the way, to your reelection.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. How many years will it be?
This time 4.
Fourth decade, you mean?
4 decades. Yeah. You're right. Thank you.
Yeah.
We did have the benefit of some budget committee meetings last week, post-election day as well. So, other commissioners?
I have nothing to report.
Yeah, I would ask that I go last after we have you and staff, and then I'll respond to Commissioner Rogers.
Okay, well, I'll go next. So as you know, with Mitch Greenlick's death, Representative Mitch Greenlick will be going through an appointment process for House District 33. Just a heads up for your calendar, that may come up in June. Once we receive the official notification from the Secretary of State, we need to fulfill that appointment within 30 days. So Kevin and staff are working with Multnomah County staff to set up the appropriate venues since that House district spans portions of the 2 counties. And I sent you an email with a map on that. We had the Washington County Visitors Association Board of Directors meeting last Thursday. The focus was on the budget for 2020, 2021. Hotel occupancy is now just starting to tick up ever so slightly compared to the downturn with the advent of COVID. Nonetheless, this next budget year will be down significantly as we wade through the recession. For the Governor's Regional Solutions Team meeting last Thursday, the chairs from the 3 counties were asked to speak with regard to reopening. And as we are all well versed, Clackamas County submitted their application last Tuesday after their board meeting and reopened the whole county reopened as of Friday. We submitted through our CAO and the EOC the Washington County application on Friday afternoon. We've gotten acknowledgement from the governor's office that they've received that. Then they'll have OHA go through the process, and when Marnie speaks later on the COVID-19 update, she can speak to that. Rumor has it that there are several mayors who will be here in Washington County who will be writing to the governor asking her to expedite the reopening of Washington County. Amongst the 3 chairs, we have had continued conversation about the need to move regionally as well as to continue to procure additional dollars for the public health and economic support of the region, and we'll continue our joint efforts around that. With regard to reopening status, well, Marnie will speak with regard to what the numbers are telling us. We have seen a bump that many are attributing to Mother's Day celebrations. We'll see how it goes with Memorial Day caseload, but we won't see that for a couple weeks. My hope remains that we can reopen and keep going forward. This week, tomorrow, tonight we have our evening meeting. Tomorrow night we have our budget public hearings, and then Friday we have our CAO interviews. And then also Thursday morning, the Westside Economic Alliance is sponsoring a virtual breakfast forum with the Westside mayors. So we have a lot going on this week. On the CAO convened Coronavirus Relief Fund internal work group. So as Commissioner Rogers mentioned, we've continued our conversation. We've had all kinds of questions from different forums. So the same staff that are involved with this work group are the same staff members that are pushing mightily in supporting us and our community on our coronavirus efforts. So they're continuing to push hard on all fronts, despite having very full plates. The plan has been, we've been working on a document and a reference table to bring to the board for review and thumbs up for public release next Tuesday. I understand that Commissioner Willie wants to make some other requests from that, but our plan is to get a good solid set of documentation to us as a board so that we can have a final discussion and release of that out to the public so that we are better prepared organizationally to respond. And that's it from me. Leadership.
I just have one item. There been a little bit of confusion messaging on the CAO interviews. The board starts at 10:30. The 8 o'clock is me. With I start a round and then they go to the board. So in case you were thinking it was 8 for the board, no, it's 10:30.
Okay.
I have a good news, bad news, good news situation. So start with the bad news. Last Friday, I think we sent out a notice to you that the Jill Warren LCDC enforcement hearing was held on Friday in Salem. And if you recall, that arose from the sort of the change in state laws on what is a buildable lands inventory. And so that took all the way to get to the Court of Appeals to interpret that. And then when that came down and told us what to do, we put it on our work plan to fix it. Ms. Warren went to the DLCD and asked for an enforcement order. The hearings officer there said no, the county's going to fix it when they get their thing going, but they told us to fix it. And then they took that recommendation to the LCDC, and the LCDC surprisingly said no, we're going to impose an injunction on land use applications that are involved SNR, significant natural resources. So we're going to be looking into that and coming back to you for some direction. But our ultimate plan is to put the ordinance in place and run it through a process and have it fixed that way. So that was the bad news. The good news is that today we learned that the Court of Appeals affirmed 2 cases that went to LUBA that Jackie took up on the basically definition of what is a lot. And they were our whole planning commission chair, Mr. Weil, and one of our planning commissioners were arguing that you can rely on sort of the government surveys to create these lots. And so for a case of statewide significance, the Court of Appeals rejected those and actually affirmed without opinion. So that's a pretty significant victory for how we define our lots. And then also today I learned that the Supreme Court has reversed the Court of Appeals and the McCormick versus the state of Oregon. That's the recreational immunity cases. There's 2 cases going up to them, and that's where they basically, the Court of Appeals took recreational immunity out of the picture once again by saying that the state or counties can't permit people to use public trust lands. That's basically any waterway. And so it was a really bad decision for us, and we had Courtney in my office, and Chris Gilmore helped her. They filed the amicus brief for the AOC, the LOC, and the Special Districts Associations. And in the 23-page opinion, the Supreme Court reestablished recreational immunity. So that's good news for everybody in the state.
I have a question back on the Land Conservation Development Commission injunction. How many land use applications, active land use applications, do we have right now that are impacted by this injunction? Because I assume that really what we're talking about is the period of time between now and when we get the ordinances adopted and in place.
Glad Stephen's here, because I don't know the answer to that. So.
That's a good question, and I don't know the specific answer for you right now. We just had an internal meeting we have a number of unanswered questions about the motion that LCDC adopted regarding the intent and effective date and scope of the injunction. So we've got together a long list of questions that we'll be taking up with DLCD staff, and then we'll also be consulting with Jacqueline and Alan. But I think in a given year, we estimate that there could be 5 to 10 applications that specifically address or impact a wildlife habitat, which is what we believe is the intent of the injunction, to focus fairly narrowly on wildlife habitat areas.
So if I'm a property owner with a land use application that's already been approved, there's that question, and then folks who may want to submit something between now and when we're done with our ordinance season. I'm not asking you for the answer to the question today, but
Right.
the question I have for you today is, when do you think you're going to have a response?
Right. Yeah, I hope we'll know more later this week. So it's really a function of really consultation with council. I think one of the questions that we are grappling with a little bit that we'll be following up with council on is, in Oregon land use, there's a goalpost rule, right? So if an application was approved prior to the imposition of the injunction, our operating assumption is that that application could continue to proceed ahead. However, it is a little bit vague in terms of how the motion was written. So I think between council and DLCD staff, we'll be working to try to hopefully craft that as narrowly as we can so that it doesn't.
But for those
Great questions.
landowners, it sounds like you'll have information sorted out
Right.
within a week's time or so.
I hope so, yes.
Great,
Thank you.
good, thank
We'll
you.
be back to the board.
Thank you.
Just a quick thought about the recreational immunity piece. If we're interested in defending or protecting that, we might want to just keep an eye on that because the Oregon Trial Lawyers Association, they write big checks to legislators, and they would love to see recreational immunity come to an end in Oregon. So
Yes, and they participated in the amicus.
if we think that's important, then we just be mindful, we can't write the kind of checks they do, but I think that recreational immunity is a good legal concept that we should be prepared to defend and lobby for.
All right, you're done. Diane,
Great.
CWS.
Thank you. Some good news to report. The Clean Water Services staff continues to be healthy and well. We have not had a COVID outbreak in the workplace. We've had several brushes where the employees were exposed in activities outside of the district, but it did not result in positive COVID cases. So they're doing a really good job maintaining health and wellness. They were looking at the types of activities, particularly with our field operations, to restore some of the things that we had deferred. They're getting ready to do that again. Your budget books were passed out to all of you. I hope you received them. If you're looking for a web link on our website under budget meetings, it's a picture with a duck on it. If you click on that, then the budget is in a PDF form. You can also get a PDF form of the budget. So we're looking forward to our June 5th budget meeting with all of you in the budget committee.
All righty. Commissioner Willie, you asked for us to come back to you?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Roy, for that lead-in on the item that I want to discuss. I sent a document today, albeit at 1:15, so I really didn't give you much time to read it, and I apologize for that. We were putting the final touches on that most of the weekend and certainly today. We've been talking a lot, and certainly the CARES group has been working really, really hard on identifying ways and places that we can best use the $104 million that we have. And certainly, public health is going to be top of the list of areas that we're going to be spending the money, and that's going to probably require the biggest allowance of the $104 million in that, and I certainly don't disagree with that. That's going to be a critical part, and there's a lot of variances that go into that bucket. So I'm glad to see that they're taking the time to do that. The purpose of the document that I sent you is that, if you'll remember, 2 weeks ago, I sent the CARES group a request to get a green light for $15 million. And I provided the documentation of what it was that we were going to do with that, or proposing that we were going to do with that $15 million, and was told that we needed to wait. So a week later, we made the request for $4 million to try and pare that down a little bit. And then I'm back today, Roy, and I'm sorry, but the price has gone up again. It's going to be $15 million again. And the reason why for that is that we know that we've applied to reopen our county, and we anticipate that to be next Monday. And in the interim, from today until next Monday, we being the business group, as we are called, the Economic Recovery Business Assistant Funding Proposal, is what we call that. We can be working on a number of things to hit the ground running next Monday. We have to keep in mind that, business is the lifeblood of this county and certainly of everyone that's involved, employed by it and not employed by it at the current time. If they have a job, they don't need as much public assistance. And so it's going to be very critical that we get the employment aspect of it rolling as quickly as possible. And we believe that having these funds available, we can begin working with the cities and with the business resource centers to develop the IGAs and get that part of it behind us so we can actually put the money to work. So that's what the purpose of the document that I sent today was, to say specifically to you, we're asking to be green lighted on the $15 million so we can begin work today, tomorrow, on providing funding to our businesses and to our community in a variety of ways, and certainly to a variety of people and groups. And so I'd encourage you, again, I apologize for getting this to you so late, you probably didn't read it, but I'd encourage you to take some time and sit down. There's been a lot of thought put into this. There's been a lot of communication and collaboration with our cities, with our chambers, with our CBOs. So we've tried to throw out a pretty wide net in this. I know that the CARES group has indicated that this proposal is going to come back to us next Tuesday as a commission. And at that point in time, the commission is going to approve it in some form or fashion. And so I am getting ahead of the game a little bit, but if this is going to be a part of the CARES allocation for this funding of the $104 million, then I'd like the opportunity to get a week's head start on you and begin working with the IGAs and the other organizations and get this to the street quicker. So that's the purpose. Since this is a commission decision, I would like to ask the commissioners if they would agree with me on this, and we could start working officially over the next 6 days before reopening is official on Monday. So that's my ask. I'm asking the commissioners to weigh in and tell me if they agree or disagree.
So let me give you an update on where things stand thus far with the work group on this information. So this is the third money ask from our two colleagues from the Business Assistance Program in less than 2 weeks. So the previous request, I had not understood at all that you were looking for immediate grant of the information. So that's new as of today. I do have a question on what the difference is between the ask from last Thursday that was $4 million and how that compares to what was then pretty clear as $3 million plus 12 more million, so 15 million. And how does 4 million compare to now this third ask? And just to round it out, so we see that the work group did review the May 14th version and pointed out that under the BRCs that the money had to be spent by the end of the year. So you corrected that. But the county council let us know that for the Business Emergency Assistance Program in item 3, that this money, per the Treasury guidance, couldn't be used for restocking inventories, but that continues to be in the May 25th version. So I think those would be some questions that the work group participants might have in looking at the third proposal.
Well, so let me give some clarification to that. First of all, the restock inventories is this money has to be spent and used. I asked for clarification from our attorney today. This money has to be spent and used by December 30th. Mm-hmm. When I call this restocking inventories, I'm talking about in the case of a restaurant that's been closed for 2 months, they have no inventory. So that's the restocking. That inventory will certainly be used easily by December 30th. So it would comply with that. And yes, we had lots of conversation about the business resource centers, contracting with them that had to be done by, or the money had to be spent. I got clarification this morning, money had to be spent. We just couldn't prepay it and let it go beyond December 30th. So there will be some enforcement and accountability by all of the BRCs, by all of the cities, that everyone knows the rules of this money and the accountability that we're going to require with it. Not only the accountability, but should we be audited by the federal government, that they will have to be a partner with us in that and responsible for money that doesn't meet criteria. All of that will be inside the IGAs that we've been talking to, again, to Alan about and Brad, and just kind of put them on the notice. Yes, this is a large undertaking, not only for the business group, but for the CARES group and for our county overall, the cities as well. Everyone's certainly invested and engaged in this. And so it's going to be good when we finally get to that point where we can say, ready, set, go. Again, this request is to allow us to get a little bit of a head start on that.
I haven't heard yet where did 4 million come up?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So we asked for the 15 and was told it's a little too early to
No,
commit to
I don't know
that.
where you got that from.
Well, let's just say I'm having conversations with Steve and some of the other committee members, and I felt like we were way ahead of the game at 2 weeks out and asking for that, because I don't even know if the group had decided on 50 million for public health at that point in time. So they were still,
They were still working on
Yeah.
the Washington County staff estimates for
Yeah.
sure.
So then we came back around, and again, with more conversation with Steve, we said, well, let's at least get the cities reimbursed and the BRC program rolling, because we know they're good. Everybody loves the BRC concept. Everybody liked the part about reimbursing the cities. So, okay, let's take baby steps here. Let's come back. And yeah, to be precise, it should have been $3 million, but we were thinking, well, maybe there's another item we can slide in there, and we just thought we'd have a little fudge factor in there for the $1 million. But, so that's how the 4 million came out. It's going to be primarily to reimburse the cities at
Could I
about 2.5.
put that differently?
Huh?
Could I put that differently? That
The fudge factor part?
the reimbursement for the cities at 2.5, the business recovery centers at $500,000, and then another allocation of 1 million from Washington County for a total of 4?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm looking at your
Kind of figured I
co-chair
wasn't
over
going to get away
there
with
on the
that fudge
committee.
factor thing. But
I don't want anybody to think we're being fast and loose with the public's dollars, that's all.
I'd like to add to the request for 4 million. I was just looking at the addendum that I sent to Commissioner Willie's initial email, which the purpose of that addendum last week just was to clarify what the request was, and also the expediency of the request. And while it didn't ask Chair for a date on the money, it did say that we were requesting immediate allocation of the $4 million for the economic recovery program. And the concept there was to
Which
get.
I think the work group had already put forth in the files that they were tracking.
Okay, the CARES work group.
Yep.
Okay, and so that, I just wanted to make sure that it was clear what that addendum was about. It was really bringing a little bit more specificity to the memo that Commissioner Willie sent last week. So that's why, but it was always intended to be a portion of a total allocation for business recovery or stable economy or stabilizing the economy or whatever terminology needs to be to be used there. The other thing I want to point out is that through the discussions over the last couple of weeks, it's become very clear that that making sure that our childcare situation is addressed has been that's moved up in the priority, and you'll see that in Commissioner Willie's email today.
Well, you saw that in what I put before all
Yes.
of you a couple of weeks ago.
And we were talking about it as well in our.
Yep, it
so-
all fits under supporting,
The economy.
recovering the economy. That's right. So I think all of these ideas are still very much in the mix. I think the work group is really comfortable with both the reimbursement of the $2.5 million and the business recovery centers and having another allocation of the Washington County Business Assistance Program. I think what the work group is trying to make sure is, as we, as a work group, have looked at what the range of possibilities could be, we wanted to ensure there's enough narrative so that folks have a good handle of what may be possible, and hence the needing the time to just finish a solid narrative for you, getting that to you hopefully later this week, for then finalizing that through the budget meeting next Tuesday. I can't speak to the logistics of what's needed to effectuate the availability of those dollars. That's something that I rely upon our CAO and our county council. I've heard now county council have two different positions on the restocking information, so I'll have to turn to Alan and help him get me back square on that, so.
Madam Chair, members of the board, yes, there's not a lot of guidance, as you know, and there are some general principles about how you can spend the money. It's directed towards public health and response to the COVID, so there's definitely money we can give to the.
U.S. Treasury guidance.
Right, U.S.
Yes.
Treasury guidance. And there's definitely money we can give to businesses to, help them. And if businesses were forced to close because of the COVID order, I think we can give money them to keep them on their feet. And again, we can't use that for capital expenses. I think we've interpreted saying that it's difficult to use it for inventory because, that's questionable whether it's directly related to the COVID. If they have to do facility retrofits, or they have to put the glass shields up, or they have to support their employees so they can keep them on the job, then that money can be used for that. So there's a lot of money we can use for local businesses, but it's questionable whether you can use it for inventory.
So that's why we're trying to make sure that we have a good enough narrative to provide to not only all of us, but to city managers, city council, service districts, and business members, because we can't have this kind of dialogue with every single party that may want to seek some of these dollars. And our staff is really working hard to try and make sure that we've got that information together so that we don't have confusion when we release it, hopefully next week. But if the board wants to entertain moving forward with a portion of that funding, then let's make a motion and see if staff is able to
I have some comments too.
Okay.
handle that.
Go ahead, Roy.
My comments would be these. I think the issue, you pointed it out well, Chair. We've been working very hard, and I think there's still a bit of work to do. But frankly, another week, we're going to lose a lot more businesses. They can't wait another week. So I like, I'll just walk through. I've been reading it on my phone since you just sent it. I like the reimbursement aspect of it, as was mentioned by our chair, that we didn't have a lot of pushback on that. I particularly like the bullet that says that that this is not going to supplant what they originally did. This is supplemental too. So I didn't want them to, I was one who said, well, wait a minute, let's get some clarification, because you don't want to give them money. And they said, great, now I got $2.5 million to spend in my road department or whatever. So I like that. I like the BRCs. I don't have any issue. I'll skip the third one for a moment, just for Roy talking. And I like the $2 million special needs, particularly for the workforce development, the PPE access. Frankly, a lot of businesses can't come up if they don't have PPE. I mean, it's just not even going to work. And so I like all of that section. The only hesitation I have on the 15 is in the 10, that it would be nice to flush out exactly what's happening in there. So 5 million of it I'd do on the spot, because I think it's necessary to get these guys back up.
Well, and so let me give you some clarification to that.
Please, yeah.
Again, we are going to be utilizing our legal department to make sure that everybody is in compliance. The other thing is that we've talked about, and we not being we broadly throughout the county, but we just internally, is the importance that we have all the cities that is going to have an allocation of this 10 million, plus unincorporated is going to have a pretty significant portion of it as well. And it's going to be important that we all have a set of ground rules, not only compliance with CARES, but what it is that we want to emphasize and focus to do with that money. So there's going to be some collaboration and certainly some conversation about how we all go about doing it. And primarily that's because, as we learned in our first round of funding, we have a number of businesses who really don't know where they live. So they think they're in Beaverton, but really they're in unincorporated Washington County, or vice versa. And so with that, we want to make sure that if we put out a grant program, which it has to be a grant program, we put out a grant program, and we don't want it to be there to be a disconnect between unincorporated and Beaverton or Hillsborough or something where these businesses apply to one and really they should have applied to the other. We want the program to be fairly consistent amongst all of the players in that. And the reason why the $10 million, quite frankly, it's a number that could be considerably larger. I made a comment, I don't know, a month ago when we were first putting out our first grants that we got 1,600 and some approved applications, so that if we gave each one of them $3,000, it would take $5 million just for that first one. See, and that's only just a little swipe at the business opportunity here. So we've got to be able to put some real money to this, and that's why I come up with the 10. Now I say it isn't just me. Pam and I have had a lot of dialogues with John Southgate and others about what this would look like. So I apologize for making that sound like it's me. It's not. But that's how we got to the 10, Roy, and that's going to be the important part of it. And the other thing is, when I say we're trying to get a little bit of a head start, I truly mean that, because we don't reopen until next Monday, hopefully. But over the next 3 days, we're going to be having a lot of dialogues. Once we get the green light, we are going to be having a lot of dialogue to be setting the foundation to answering all the questions that the chair has, each one of us are going to have, and making sure we cross the T's and dot the I's. We're trying to get started on this week, rather than waiting till next Tuesday, having a conversation with the commission, and then moving into it. So we'll have lost a week then, and then beyond. And like you said, every day that we delay, I believe, is the day we're losing businesses. So that's what that's what I'm asking. If I get a thumbs up from the commission, then we will begin to move ahead with those dialogues and working with our legal staff. So that's what I'm asking.
I would just like to clarify one point here. And when this group talks about PPEs, I think I would rather we talked in terms of personal protective equipment and sanitized equipment necessary to protect employees and customers. So to me, that's a little different than the inventory of PPEs that I think we tend to think of in terms of hospitalizations and clinics and that type of.
I don't know which document you're referring to, but I know when we put the principles together, we were very clear from the work group and the proposal we put before you that there was a category in there about protecting employees and customers. So,
And I wanted to make sure that in the memo that you got today, that's also a piece of that. So I'm just bringing that up, that it's not about PPE in relationship to a clinical setting or a medical setting.
I don't know if we have competing proposals or if we had one Washington County proposal we're working towards. But irrespective of that, I hear Commissioner Willie wanting to move forward today. My question to the CAO and to County Council is, are your staffs ready to do the work, to handle all of the necessary agreements that would transpire if the board gives the thumbs up to this proposal to move forward starting tomorrow versus with all the other things you were trying to work out and get prepared for? Because it's not for me to decide that. I don't have to do the work.
Well, we're not yet prepared. We're working towards that. But if it's the board's decision to move forward, we will reassign other staff until we can stand up the group that we're moving towards to get this done. So the answer is there is a way to accomplish it in the interim before we get, because we were working towards a permanent organization that's going to be supportive until December as we go through this process, not only getting them out the door, but managing them as well, because we all know the audit requirement that's staring us at the end of the road here. And so there's a way to accomplish it. I just might share just a little bit more, because Commissioner Willie is correct. I've been involved in the conversations, and I've shared that as we've gone through this. My concern, I think that I've expressed, and the reason I said the smaller number was more acceptable, was that the total 15 million weighed against the 39 million that we will have left to allocate based on where the work group is a significant amount of that money. And I'm concerned that it isn't weighed through the priorities that we're working on to move forward. I'm not sure how it's going to come out when we're done, but I'm a little bit uncomfortable kind of sidestepping that prioritization process that hasn't been completed yet. Whereas I think everybody is agreement on the 4 to 5 million is an acceptable carve out at this point, and then we can work from there. So that's what I've been trying to suggest as we move along.
Yep, I'm with that.
Is the way to do it.
Well, so just let me see if I can be the devil's advocate here. You tell your businesses in Washington County that you've got $104 million and you're only willing to invest $4 million of that to get them back alive again, when that business is producing the very thing that we need to get healthy again in all of the other areas. So we can be a public assistance organization until we run out of $104 million. Or we can invest in our business community to get them healthy again so that they're providing well-paid jobs, pay their own rent, provide for their families, and do all of that on their own. It's the old analogy of teaching somebody to fish or providing them the fish. And I certainly don't want to take that message out in my constituency and say, I got you $4 million and expect to get bravado.
That wasn't what I was suggesting. I was suggesting the first round, which is I think what we had been talking about originally, would be the 4 million. That wasn't all that was going into business assistance. It was simply, right now, get it out and get it moving. I agree that there's a need to do that. I just feel that we need to do the rest of it in context with the entire money and funds that are available. I'm not saying that's it. I'm simply saying that's the start.
Well, you refer to the 39 million. So I'm presuming then that there's 50 million for public health. And what I heard today, there's a 10% holdback.
No, so the Washington County staff has been working diligently to firm up what the Washington County costs have been and forward-looking through the end of the year. So they finalized that last Thursday to a $55 million estimate, which what I shared with you this morning on the phone. The other proposal that they requested was, given the uncertainty of the various application ideas, to designate a 10% contingency for now. And when you do the math on the $104 million, that would leave $39 million total. And so that is the sum total that would be available for business recovery and the other principles that were laid out and made public the last week or so. And so then the work group was moving forward in developing the narrative to solicit the ideas for how the remainder, that 39 million, might be spent, of which that would include the various ideas that your memo talks about. And the board could have been very comfortable next Tuesday with saying, oh, well, given that full context, let's set that aside and get to effectuate that and make the remainder available. But, that's neither here nor there now. We're having a more messy conversation today instead.
I don't know that I'd define it as a more messy conversation. I think we're having a more candid conversation about what's the messaging that we're sending out. And quite frankly, we've been sitting on this money for 30 days. Yep, we've been going through a lot of work. I get all of that. But it's going to be another 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It might be even longer than that before the money actually gets to the street. And as far as, again, Steve, I'm sorry, but when you tell me you don't have the staffing to facilitate something like this, and so as we're going to delay it another week because we need to get the staffing available to do this, that's just another message. And I don't accept that.
That was not what I suggested, Commissioner Willie. I said that we're working on the permanent staffing, but we can staff up tomorrow if that's the board's wish. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that was my statement.
Okay. All right. Well, then I would encourage you to do that.
How do we want to take this? I mean, the 5 million, the 15 million, I'm good at some point. I think we need to have a little more dialogue on the 10 million. The 5 million, as I said, I'm not altering.
It was 3 million. It grew to 4 million. I'm not suggesting we grow it to 5 million.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I'm taking your letter and I'm saying the 5 million that you have in your letter. Bullets 1, 2, and I can pull back up again. Whatever it is, all but the 10 million. I'd do that right this second, but that's just me. And the 10 million, it's going to take a week for you to kind of figure out how it's all going to be dispersed anyway, so it might give us some time to play with it. But if there's a
Yeah, but we
commitment,
can't figure out how it works if we haven't got a guarantee it's going to
a
be.
commitment. Yeah, no, I understand the commitment.
And that's the whole point of the thing, is that we can't get started until we can get started. So we're sitting at a red light, hoping that we get the green light, and then we'll go forward with something. So that's the reason why this is my third attempt at doing this, because I'm not giving up on it.
So how would you summarize your ask again?
$15 million committed to the business recovery group, what we're calling, I gotta use the right heading here, the Economic Recovery Business Assistance Funding Proposal, okay? And that's what the ask is just to get the green light. I mean, we're not asking for a check, we're asking for permission to move ahead, begin establishing the IGAs, begin conversations with the cities on what our expectations of them are, and what the, in this particular case, the $10 million allocation, what that would look like and how we would roll that out. All of that is going to take a considerable amount of conversation with our partners, not with our internal staff, but with our partners, and then using, of course, our legal staff to drop the IGAs that look like that. I mean, I've checked in with our legal staff, and they said they'd be ready when we needed them to be ready. So I didn't anticipate that would be a problem.
So is the ask for 15 or for 10?
Roy says 10 because he wants the 5 of the original and 5 more. We're advocating that would kind of have to do, we'd have to do a recalculation and redo. I guess I'm trying to.
I'm not saying the 10, I said the
There's
5 million to take the 10 and commit it.
Can we
Yeah.
come back to that, Roy?
Yeah, please.
The memo talks about 4 buckets.
Correct.
So 1 and 2 make 3 million. The third
Is on the bottom, look at his very bottom one.
is special needs, but that kind of looks like they took the ideas from the various bullets from the principals and sort of clumped them into one bucket called special needs. And I don't know that that's
I like it. You may not.
necessarily the right way to sweep it all in. So because not all of our business recovery funds are going to work through the business assistance, the existing Washington County Business Assistance Program. This presumes that all of it, may presume, I don't know, that all of it does. So that's why, but it sounds like the clarification is Commissioner Rogers is suggesting provide $5 million, which is items 1, 2, and 4 from that memo. Whereas Commissioner Willie's asking for the full 15 million by adding bullet number 3, or category number 3.
With a commitment that the other 10 million, we're going to look seriously at getting it. I think we ought to do it.
And by when?
Next Tuesday.
We lose a week.
I'm not willing to throw staff under the bus at this point. I think we had a fine proposal to make sure that we looked decently cohesive as an organization.
Want to clarify, we're not throwing staff under the bus.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. That's not really a fair statement to make, I think.
So I'm asking for the 15. Not giving up.
Where's Commissioner Trees?
Well, I'm of the mind that you don't cut your nose to spite your face. And so, and I trust my fellow commissioners that you will look seriously at the remainder. I would say, Jerry, I don't think we're going to get to the 15. So
You don't know yet. You don't know till you ask.
you're right. You don't know till you ask. But I do know that right now we can get to, and I'm confused if it's 3, 4, or 5, but I think it's 5.
I think it's 5.
I know that we can do 5 right now with the assurance that that there is a general acceptance of the concept of additional money going to the businesses.
It's a wish and a prayer. That's all it is. That's all we've had. We've had it for 3 weeks. We've had that. It's we promised to look at the other 10. We can't do anything until we get a commitment.
That's the
On
part where I
15.
feel like it
Well, we
throws
can
staff
do.
under the bus,
we-
sorry.
We can do,
No, we
We
can
can't
have
do the
conversations.
BRCs,
We
and
can
we
have
can't reimburse
conversations
the
with our county
cities.
partners, okay? We can have conversations if we have a commitment. If we don't have a commitment, we're wasting time. We're wasting our time. It's not wasting staff time, Catherine, okay? It's wasting our time of reaching out to our fellow partners here in the county.
I also believe that if we are in a position where we understand conceptually what what this looks like, we can start looking at what it would take to initiate the additional dollars out. And I know that I'm frustrating you right now.
Yes, you are.
I
Yes,
know
you are.
I know.
Yeah.
But I'm also don't want to
You
walk
went
away.
180 on me, Pamela.
No,
I'm going to call you out on that.
no, I'm not. I am saying that I don't want to walk away from the table with nothing.
We're not going to walk away at the table with nothing. We're going to walk away with a commitment from the commission or not a commitment from the commission. And both of those are sending huge messages to everybody listening to this conversation.
Well, one of the other comments I'd make, I'm not sure, again, I come from the small business community, but I'm not sure that 10 million's enough.
Well, we're pretty sure it's not enough, but
Yeah, I'm not
we
sure.
got to live within our own means as well.
Well, maybe. I mean, we got still, even if we do this 5 with a commitment for 10, I mean, we should be looking more robust, in my opinion. In my opinion,
So I should have asked for 20?
30. No,
Yeah.
I'm teasing. So is there a
I can
motion?
tell you that I believe strongly that we need $15 million. I understand that. But I
agree.
also understand the process that has been presented. And that's why I said what I said earlier. And I'll say that to Commissioner Willie, that I understand the process. And if there is that level of commitment by my fellow commissioners, I will trust that.
Meaning level of commitment to what?
To eventually getting to 15.
That does strike me as a reasonable number in the ratio of the 104 million. We're looking at, my understanding is we're looking at something in the neighborhood of 40 million plus on the public health side. I think we all see this as a economic as well as a public health disaster. The two are intertwined. That number does not strike me as being an unreasonable number. The 15.
For sake of kind of moving us, Madam Chair, I'd make a motion that we commit $5 million, that's buckets 1, 2, and 4, and that we make a strong recommendation to the group to find at least $10 million of additional by next Tuesday. No second?
I'll second.
Discussion. You're voting against it?
I'm voting against it. It's a no to me.
I'm going to vote against it because I think that we had a process that the board had discussed last on the 12th. And I think that with the work that staff has been doing to put the package together for the board for next week, I think that the result that you were working towards was definitely there. But if we move forward with this action today, that means that the work that staff was doing so that we could have our final discussion and hit the ground running with board direction next Tuesday will be shifted now. And so they'll have to regroup and figure it out. And so I don't know what that does prior to or in advance of their taking the results of this discussion. So I didn't want to derail us getting out of the chute with a sound proposal for all of the cities, service districts, community partners, and to the public in general. And it just seems to me like we've got too many balls in the air to have a straightforward set of proposals and action. So I think the dollar amounts are still totally reasonable to be entertaining. It's just making sure that we have a clear enough process so that we can effectuate those dollars as effectively and quickly as possible. So we have a motion and a second. I guess I was the only one for discussion. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Oops, I was not an aye. Opposed?
No.
No. So it passes 3-2. So to our CAO and to County Council, you have direction on that. All right, Commissioner Willie, did you have anything else during leadership communication? All right, so we'll pick back up with the next item on our agenda, food access and partnerships to improve county health. And it looks like we have folks on Zoom.
Yes, we do. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you,
Great.
whoever you are.
Can you see me?
It looks like you might be Aaron Jolly from the little tiny box I can see on the screen.
Yes. Hi, this is Erin Jolly with Washington County Health and Human Services. Thank you for having us here today. I'm going to start with introducing my co-presenters who will be presenting today on food access in Washington County, who are also on Zoom here. So we have Bruce Bartlett with the OSU Extension Service Citizen Advisory Network. I believe you also know him as the CPO guy. We have Maureen Quinn Loris with OSU Extension Service in the Nutrition Education Family and Community Health Program. And then we have Kaylee Summers, the Health Equity Manager for Adelante Mujeres, on Zoom today presenting. So I will get us started. I wanted to provide a reminder and some background about this presentation. Your board and Chair Harrington, you had requested a presentation on food access and culturally specific food access issues and efforts in the county. That request was pre-COVID, so we're obviously in a very different environment now, but we will present kind of an overview of current work in the county and programmatic and community response to address food access issues in response to COVID. So a few notes to share before we start. This presentation is a pretty broad kind of landscape view of current food access issues and programs. The team presenting today worked with many community organizations and partners and county programs to pull this together to have a little more of a comprehensive understanding of the work going on in this area. So we recognize there's kind of broad strokes here, and so let us know if there are specific areas you'd like us to delve into at a future meeting. And with that, just a couple things to start us. I wanted to acknowledge the significant equity issues that are critical to food access topic and are particularly heightened right now in the COVID environment. We know we're not able to fully delve into those in this presentation, but we wanted to acknowledge those. And I also wanted to share a few takeaways for you to consider just as we present and walk through the talk today. And these are things that I really heard from our community partners as we prepared this. The first is that this need existed in our community, and COVID-19 has made it more evident and increased the need, but it existed. And the second is you'll hear about so many incredible partners and individuals supporting and leading food access work. in the county, and yet there's still so much need. And the third that I heard from partners was how key coordination work is, and that we have a force of partners and volunteers working to address this issue, but there's much more coordination needed. So next slide. So just some brief data to start us out about the current food access issues in Washington County. About 10% of Washington County residents are food insecure, and 16.5% of children live in a household that is food insecure. That's 2017 data, so we know that does look different right now. And some examples that demonstrate how the need has been increasing in our community. Participation in our county WIC program has increased by 334 in March and 183 in April. Our Oregon Food Bank's free food markets, which is one of their lowest barrier options, saw a 103% increase in households that were being served and 94% increase in individuals served. Meals on Wheels people saw a 20% increase, has seen a 20% increase. And then we just did want to highlight through this presentation that with the significant increases in unemployment, how many new families and community members are dealing with this issue and navigating the programs that we'll describe for the first time. So I'll turn it over to Bruce to talk more about our programs, and you can go to the next slide.
My video is muted, Rose, so I don't think I can.
We can
What
hear
we're looking
you,
at,
Bruce.
very good. Excuse me. So we're looking at what's called an overview of the food access programs, which is really a depiction of our local food system. It starts with preparing the soil and planting the seeds, to storing and transporting the food, and then the huge task of making it available to people in a form and at a time that they need it. And finally, clean up after in the food waste prevention and the food. Next, please. This is a busy slide, but it's intended to show the overall scope of the issue. On the left side, the food production and growing, you have support for small farm producers. The OSHA service offers the small farms program to help them do that. The agricultural support programs, similarly. I like to use the term urban agriculture for all of the non-commercial gardening and horticulture that goes on. The OSU Master Gardeners program is preeminent in this. And just this year, 30,000 Oregon residents have taken the free Master Gardener vegetable growing class. There's gardens taught, there's the SNAP seeds, and all the different programs, the 4-H and Future Farmers of America are all doing things growing and produce food. The food distribution, you have the midway through, you have the WIC program, SNAP, and Meals on Wheels people. The WIC program I read serves about half of the children in the nation. 20% of Oregon's population receives the SNAP benefit. And the Meals on Wheels people, I talked to the Forest Grove Senior Center today, and they were serving 70 meals a day before the pandemic came along and closed the senior center, and now they're serving 200 meals a day. Gives you a little feeling for the scope of the increase. On the bottom of that column, the 211 navigation support. 211 is akin to the 911 or 411 numbers that you can dial, and it takes you into 211 takes you into a hub that allows you to find food support, medical support, housing support, mental health support. It's a clearinghouse that is run by, it's substantially by United Way. The column on the right, that the Eat Smart, Waste Less program that the county runs, all of this really falls under the umbrella of emergency planning, because in a healthy society where people's wages allowed them to have meaningful jobs and pay their way, we wouldn't need to have as much support as we do. The Food Preservers program is run by the OSU Extension Master Food Preservers. And then the Master Recyclers program is a 3-county effort that teaches composting amongst other things. So that gives you a little scale of what you see, but you'll notice that the OSU Extension Service is a through line through all of these different aspects of the programs that we offer. So next slide, please. This shows a map of the food pantries in Washington County, both those that are affiliated with the Oregon Food Bank and those that run independently based on donations, such as the Sunshine Pantry. Meals on Wheels has 5 different sites of preparing and distributing food from, and there are 46 food programs set up that are run out of schools. And since this is closed down, this is posing a significant problem. The Westview High School had a food program run out of school, but since the school's been closed down, it is now being run out of a neighbor's front porch, and they're feeding about 70 families who come by, 70 young people actually, who come by to get food on a daily basis. It's a good example of a hub. And the Urban Gleaners is a group that also is active and will become active as the crops are harvested and can be gleaned from.
Could you please explain, on this slide, we're seeing red hearts, purple carts, green trucks, and orange trucks.
Yeah, the green trucks are partner agencies with the Oregon Food Bank. The orange trucks are agencies that the food bank is getting set up for delivery. The coral hearts are social services that distribute food. They may or may not be open to the public. The light green people icon are school pantries, and the purple shopping cart are the relatively new phenomena of free food markets. And you'll see a pretty good distribution, but there are holes, geographic holes, plus a number of these pantries are only open on a day or two a week, and some only for a few hours on those days. So you're not seeing a widespread 24/7 availability. People have to know when it's available and be able to get to the site in order to take advantage of the service.
Thank you.
And Kaylee now is going to offer some explanation of the challenges that people face navigating these systems.
Hi, this is Kaylee Summers from Adelante Mujeres. Thank you for having us today.
Hang on, Keely.
Yes.
We can barely hear her. Can we turn that
Can
audio
you hear?
up?
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you. So my name is Kaylee Summers. I'm from Adelante Mujeres, and thank you, Bruce and Aaron, for setting the stage for all of this discussion. I think what we really wanted to let you all know is moving from that macro scale to more of the micro scale of how does this actually look for a family or a community member navigating these systems in Washington County. And we know that there are many programs and many grassroots efforts as well as coordinated efforts going on currently and pre-COVID. But for someone who pre-COVID was already experiencing issues and barriers to childcare, transportation, housing, balancing work, and getting your kids to school and picking them up from daycare, financial resources, language barriers, cultural barriers, all of these things are compounded during the COVID pandemic situation. And so, not only for folks that were navigating these systems pre-COVID, but now we have an influx of families and individuals who are new to navigating these systems. So, folks that are for the very first time accessing unemployment, accessing SNAP benefits. And we see that there is a huge need, and we'd like to highlight this, that the need for those connections and coordination and navigation. So it's so important to have people who can help families and individuals, you know, uh, not only access those resources, but navigate how do you apply for those things, or how do you show up at a certain time, or how do you read that map with all the different types of colored dots and things like that. And so there's a huge importance for community-based organizations and community health workers and community leaders to help walk people through that system. And Erin, we can go to the next slide, and Erin is going to explain a little bit more about what's happening now with the essential needs hubs.
Yeah, just to kind of shift our gear a little bit on the presentation, we wanted to talk more specifically about COVID-19 response to food access needs. And one component that's really been central to that response is the newly formed essential needs hubs. These are happening with cities and partners across Washington County have been working in partnership with our Washington County Emergency Operations Center to stand these up. And they are their hub for people to obtain food, face coverings, and other essential needs, things like diapers, for example, and really are a place to coordinate efforts to support residents. So they coordinate volunteers, accept donations, share resources. And a key takeaway I've heard has been how valuable this structure has been, and that there was already a need for this type of hub structure, that the COVID-19 response kind of revealed an opportunity to better coordinate and develop this structure, and that there will continue to be a need for some kind of essential needs hub structure. So these are currently happening in each city in Washington County, coordinating these essential needs hubs. So Kaylee will talk a little bit more about some of the other programmatic and community responses.
Great. So as I mentioned before, folks are experiencing some of these barriers, even just getting to those essential hubs, getting to a food pantry or a service when you have kids at home that normally would have been in school, and you don't have childcare or someone to watch them, and you're wrangling 3 kids standing in line to get a food box, and making sure that they're adhering by social distancing measures, keeping 6 feet away from folks. So there has been changes and responses also to help with some of those challenges. Things like expanding program accessibility or the guidelines, or, for example, applying for SNAP, having those applications available online in download PDF form and fillable form, so that someone doesn't have to necessarily go into a DHS office, that they can and they don't have to have a printer necessarily to download a file and fill that out. Although the online applications for things like that, to just submit an online application, is still just in English. And so, again, we get to some of those barriers that continue on. We have seen, obviously, an expansion in SNAP, the maximum amount for SNAP, the state passing the availability of pandemic EBT for children who are already enrolled in free and reduced lunch programs at their schools. We have things like Farmers to Food food box programs, farmers who previous may have had a contract with a restaurant or an institutional buyer, and those contracts have ceased because of COVID. So farmers donating some of that food to either food banks themselves or food pantries in their area. There's other grant programs through the Oregon Food Bank. Farmers markets are changing up some of their protocol and trying to make things a little bit more accessible by drive-up options or drive-through options. And again, as I mentioned before, the eligibility and guidelines for some of these programs is starting to or has expanded. School lunch programs, delivering food on bus routes or to apartment complexes in certain areas, changes also to WIC income requirements, mailing out items such as breast pumps or other food lists and different things like that. There's programs that are popping up too for having free food vouchers available so that families can go to farmers markets. Those are being mailed out to certain families. And you can go to the next slide now. And we were trying to document for you an easily understandable list of resources that are happening between coordinated organizations or larger institutions such as the Oregon Food Bank. But there is a ton of response just from individual volunteers, grassroots efforts that have popped up, new partnerships that are addressing gaps in communities throughout Washington County. And so just to name a few of these new partnerships that are happening, folks like the Hillsborough Senior Center delivering food bags to Hillsborough Meals on Wheels, the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, partnering up with local businesses to provide culturally specific meals for different community members, food storage coordination for schools and restaurants, partnerships to deliver food boxes to migrant camps, delivery services for quarantined individuals. So again, transportation and delivery service has been a need during this time for elderly or immune compromised folks. And so just shifting that distribution flow, but also delivery services as well. And one last thing to mention here, that as individuals, we've seen a resurgence of this idea of victory gardening, that we saw during World War II, and individuals gardening in their own home plots or pots and things, that we've seen an increased access or utilization of the Master Gardener programs, online tools, and increases in buying soil even and other gardening implements to do their own home gardening. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Maureen to talk about some of the other community issues.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to let you know about how our community issues identified by our partners have gone. And my video is being muted at the DVCTV end, but I'm happy to be with you. And equity, capacity, and logistics, and economic and labor issues were sort of the three buckets that our partners identified. We know the importance of accessing culturally specific food, but transportation and childcare are important as well. And geography and isolation issues are a couple of other big pieces that are coming up for members of our community during this time where, again, as Kaylee mentioned, the logistics of doing physical distancing, doing it in a timely manner, and doing it when you can get in and out of places you need to go while your car's working. There's also been capacity and logistics issue with pantries having the ability to store things and get them moved out in a timely fashion. And we've seen an economic and labor pivot very rapidly with farms really working with their workers to be able to manage the harvest and distribute while still working on social and physical distancing and rapid fire hand washing to keep the staff, let me start my video, to keep the staff moving in a rapid fire but still safe manner. Next file, please. On this slide, we just want to let you know that there's a lot of support for infrastructure going on. There's a tremendous data collection and equity force in our county. It's being supported across the Vision Action Network of members, as well as many other government and faith-based partners. There is a countywide local coordination of a lot of pieces of this, but there's another opportunity for some additional farm support for keeping the local economy, eating the local economy's food. So there are people who've committed, both as groups and individuals, to buy those local foods as folks have pivoted to get them out. And then the cooperation with emergency planning, you know and have heard about that, as well as support for traditional community health workers, because they are helping people navigate this disconnect of language about how to get to things. Next slide, please. In conclusion, we'd like to thank all of the many community leaders, organizations, and partners doing incredible work to address food needs in Washington County. And we urge the board to consider how you can support this work moving forward. And we thank you very much.
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Maybe just to start with the question that you just asked us at the end, do you have some concrete recommendations for us as to how we could further the work?
A lot of the individual efforts are silent, and they're doing heart-based work on an individual basis, and they're unaware of the allies that they have, maybe even next door doing similar work, who are unaware of each other. The city of has put together a pretty good map of the people doing work in that Multnomah County, so that somebody doing the work can go to the map and find out who is doing it, who can I ask questions of, who can I cooperate with. And that kind of coordinated effort is something that Washington County would be ideally suited for, maybe even through the community engagement department, making people aware, giving an easy way to be aware of who all is doing what work and what the needs are.
The only other I'm just going to say the comment I would make is food, I know we don't like to think of it that way, but it's a commodity like a lot of other things. And I'm not an expert in the commodity fields, but if you look at what's happening nationally, milk is being poured down the drain because the pricing is not sufficient for them to distribute, to have in the Midwest fields being plowed under, again, for distribution. So part of your ask ought to be, and we ought to make that somewhat a priority through our legislative folks, that there has to be some sort of national buy. As you mentioned it in regard to warehousing, it has to be done on a national level as well, so that there's some method that these farmers who are trying to make a living, they can get a decent price for their product, that we warehouse as much as we can, and then we distribute to those most in need. But you're looking at it very micro in just the county and in the area, and I appreciate all the hard work you do, but there's a much bigger issue here than maybe we're talking about.
That's absolutely true. The DA has started a farmer to family or farmer to food pantry project, which does exactly that, Commissioner Rogers. I think that as we learn more about that program, we will take advantage of it.
So I have a comment. So last year, I expressed concern about community needs, including in this area for food access, and was interested in learning more about what the unmet basic needs are in our community. I'm pleased to hear that the COVID crisis has motivated and mobilized many to address the food access needs of many in our community. I'm still left wondering, despite that great collaborative work, I'm not yet able to quantify or qualify what the unmet needs are for our community in a fashion where we're able to sustain this momentum that we have from the COVID crisis response to make sure that we have lessened the overall need in our community. So I'll leave that question back to our Health and Human Services staff to come back to. I appreciate this overview. You know, I appreciated seeing the slide that was the overall, the overview of food access programs. I think that provided a great snapshot. The message I got out of that is Washington County has some aspect of that, but I don't know which. So obviously there's more for me to better understand about what our current county investments are. Then I know that COVID's brought additional need and investments in, but I'm wondering where will we go from here in the next fiscal year and beyond. But this was a good start. Any other commission questions? Nope.
I just want to say thank you for the information. And also, it is impressive to see what the overview of the food access programs are and where the food pantries are. But it is an ongoing issue, and this is something that we need to be in partnership to address.
We're all shaking our heads.
Yeah.
Erin,
Thank
is
you.
there anything else you wanted to close with?
I just wanted to thank you and thank our co-presenters. We will follow up on some of the questions about the unmet need. I think the thing that I heard over and over from partners was the need for county-wide coordination on this work, that even if there's enough resources in some communities, that there's a need to better coordinate and work on supply issues to address food inequities. So I think we can work on figuring out exactly what that looks like, and thinking more about how to describe some of the unmet needs. So appreciate your questions and all of the partners that helped with the presentation today. It was amazing to see how much work is happening in our community.
And if I can add just 2 seconds, that the importance of navigation, individual navigation for individuals and families is paramount right now, because we can have as many food access points as we want, or as possible for federal, county, state funding. But if people don't know how to actually access that or navigate that system, they're not getting the food that they need. And so by supporting organizations or individuals who are throwing their heart and soul into helping people navigate that system, I think that's where we can really ask for your support as well.
Well,
Thank you, Kaylee.
I'm not hearing any proposals from staff to us as the board at this time in order to effectuate anything on that need, other than the EOC is empowered to do the work that they are empowered to do in supporting the community in response to the COVID-19 crisis. And then anything beyond that, our staff is empowered to bring that forward to the board for future policy and investment decisions. So I'll just have to leave it at that.
Thank you, Chair Harrington.
Thank you very much. And thank you to each of you for serving our community. What you do each and every day makes a huge difference in the lives of the many. And thank you for joining us in today's meeting. Oops. All right, we'll move on then to the next item on our agenda, which is the COVID-19 update with Marnie Kyle.
Hey, it's afternoon, so good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board.
I'm relatively short today. This evening, you'll have guest presenters. Dr. Christina Bauman and Ann Loeffler will be here to talk about kind of the medical aspects of COVID-19 and to share a summary of what's happening with the OHSU study. So that's on tonight's agenda.
Who's Ann Loeffler?
So she is a community physician, and she's one of our new Tri-County health officers. So Dr. Bauman will introduce her this evening.
Great.
And I believe they're both going to be on Zoom, and I'll be here too, but I'm not going to be part of the presentation tonight. So just for this afternoon, I wanted to start as usual with some of our numbers. So since overnight, so over the holiday, we had 4 new cases since last night. We've had 267 tests over the weekend. So that brings us to 696 cumulative positives since February.
19? Didn't we have 19 also, 19 new cases?
So yes, we did have, and so
Cumulatively over the weekend, we had more than 4.
yes, so 4 was since yesterday. Yes. We did have a couple of big days, I believe and we're going to look, actually it's pulled up here. So we were going to look, I wanted to look at this.
That's why I can't see it.
Whoops. So, so that gets us right into the prerequisite. So I was going to start with the top one, which is hospitalizations. And what that chart shows you is the number of hospitalizations by day over time. And what I wanted to bring up to you is I think that you have maybe seen an OHA chart that shows that we don't meet this prerequisite requirement. And when we turned in our application on Friday, they also were saying we don't meet this prerequisite. However, we believe that we do meet the prerequisite. OHA is using a statistical methodology called linear regression model, which we believe that you really can't apply that statistical test to numbers below 20. And as you can see, really since May 1st, we have not had more than 2 cases per day hospitalized. So, we believe that they're using an inaccurate statistical method, and we do not think that this number is going to keep us from being able to reopen.
Yep, there's no such thing as a decimal point person after all.
I would respond to you, though I'm not trained in math that had enough of it, and I absolutely agree with you. That's not statistically valid.
Right.
So I agree with that.
Yes, and we have, PhD level epidemiologists that are also telling me this, so I wouldn't trust me to say it, but I would definitely trust but we've had fewer than 2 cases, and in the past 5 days, and I actually, that was as of the 23rd, so it's 3 days behind, we have had 0 new hospitalizations. So that's all good news. So then if we go to the other, you can look at the other daily confirmed cases, and that chart showing, yes, we did have yes, this is the right chart, the daily confirmed. So you can see that this one does show the blip that we saw, that we had 14 cases on 5/20, and then we had 10 new on 5/22, and 10 cases on 5/23. So yes, we have seen that blip, but our daily average, if you go to the green dots, our daily average is still averaging about 7 cases a day.
So I was interested in your being the public health person, not me. I've heard some liken that blip to perhaps increase social activity with Mother's Day. So I wanted to ask you, as the public health expert, does that make sense, or should I not even think about
So it could make sense, but if we go to the other slide, which is the percent of positives. So if you look at the percent of positives, it's gone down significantly since mid-April. And in May, it's been hovering around 3%. And so to answer your questions, it could be a Mother's Day blip, but remember, we're also doing a lot more tests.
Okay.
And
that
so
works. Great.
I think that the more meaningful, and I have to be honest, I didn't have a chance to run this by the epidemiologist. So if I'm wrong, they can correct me tonight. But when I looked at this chart, to me, this is probably more meaningful to look at, because as you're doing more tests, to just look at a number isn't going to be as meaningful. So I would direct us to consider this one. But yeah, it could be. I was worried about Mother's Day and the lovely sunshine weather and people wanting to see, Mom and Nana and everybody, so.
But each of these graphs that you've displayed here are available right on the Washington County dashboard.
Yes. And also the narrative. So if you back out of the data graphs, then the narrative is on there as well.
Thank you.
Yes. So what does all that data mean? Because the measure is decreased prevalence. And what the data is showing is that we continue to have decreased prevalence in Washington County. So the next question that we get is, well, what if OHA approves our reopening tomorrow or the next day? Can we open earlier? And from staff's perspective, we completely understand the desire to open as quickly as possible, including the discussion that you had earlier at this board work session. But if Washington County were to open before Monday, June 1st, we're concerned that we would not be able to adequately implement daily monitoring for those who are ill or contacts of ill individuals. Remember, we're just getting the staff hired today, over the weekend and today. Their first training is Wednesday. We're worried about being able to facilitate the presumptive individuals that need to get tested. There's still a lot of barriers and coordination that we need to work through with the healthcare systems. We're also a little concerned that we wouldn't be able to do all of the positive cases within 24 hours, so meet the ongoing metric. We're worried about supporting the food and basic needs of those that would need to be put into isolation and quarantine, and just the logistics of notifying the businesses and providing the technical assistance. So I know the notifying them would be pretty easy. It will spread like wildfire, but we also need to be prepared to provide the technical assistance and support that they need. So public health would do whatever the board directs us to do. If the commissioners do make the decision, if we are notified that we can open earlier and that decision is made, we will do what we need to do and manage it as best that we can. But I also wanted to give you a little red flag concern that's come up today. So I was notified this morning, and today we have facilitated the testing of 220 vulnerable workers. We expect that many of those that were tested today are going to be positive. We'll get results probably tomorrow and Thursday at the latest. And staff are on site. They've been on site since early this morning, and I believe they're still on site, and they're assessing the situation, working with Virginia Garcia and the Farm Workers Association to ensure that workers have all the resources they would need if we do have to issue isolation or quarantine recommendation. So that means that all hands are on deck for the next 1 to 2 days to deal with this situation. because we want to assure that we stop any spread to the community, that we keep this within the population that's currently impacted. At the same time, we have staff who are working on onboarding that first wave of temporary workers. So I want to pause there for a minute.
What are we talking about? To the degree that you're able to speak publicly on this, I mean, are you talking about a particular farm, a particular work site?
So we don't want to provide a lot of public information right now to protect sort of everybody involved. Right now, it's contained situation, but we're working really hard to ensure that it stays that way. It's not general, it's not a general community spread. So I would prefer not to say more than that, and I was a little hesitant to even bring it here, but I also don't want you to be surprised if our numbers go up significantly.
Well, Commissioner Scout, and I appreciate that
Okay.
you've inquired on that, because as I was listening to you, I was thinking, well, okay, staff is working on this, so, we're catching a lot of heat from our urban community, especially businesses that want to open up, as well as from mayors who want to see those businesses open up in their communities. But the real operative message that I heard from you is it's all hands on deck to stop the spread to the community. So that told me I don't need further information, that if your team is not successful, then we have a elevated, significant risk of, I'll call it my words, this outbreak spreading into our general community.
Yeah.
Have I
Yeah,
mischaracterized the situation?
No, I think just to be clear about a couple of things. One is we just did the testing today. So, we don't know, but we expect that there'll be positives, and then it would be an outbreak. As of today, it's not. It's just testing. The other is that now, the other is that we believe that if we can contain this and that it's not community spread, then we will be able to, we will still likely be able to open June 1st. But it is a reason to not consider opening before June 1st because we need to contain this.
I wasn't aware that there was any possibility of us opening before June 1st.
There is there's a lot of requests and pressure to open as soon as we can. If we get notified by OHA to open sooner. And I think, like Chair Harrington did mention earlier, there's rumor, I don't know if it's true, that the mayors have sent a request to the governor's office to open before then.
So you're correct, Commissioner Scout, in that our staff has told us that in order for them to get the appropriate temporary staff onboarded and trained, they need the time until Monday, June 1st. So they're continuing to be consistent there. What Marnie is noting is the political pressure that many of us are under from different parties, businesses, community members, as well as from the mayors, saying, let's make this happen before the weekend versus after the weekend.
Yeah. So I also wanted to give you a quick update on where we are with the new staffing. So we have hired 3 bilingual bicultural nursing supervisors, and we've also hired our first 4 nurses. They're starting this week. With the nursing contract, we can bring nurses on as fast as we want them, so there shouldn't be any delays related to nursing staff. We have 17 contact tracers that have been given job offers, and they're all pending background checks and reference checks. That's a requirement for this kind of work. An ITS is standing ready, and I actually don't know, it could, if their background checks passed this morning, ITS is ready to issue computers this afternoon, and OHA training is holding some slots for our staff beginning tomorrow, and there's also some training slots on Friday. So that's been really good progress. Other EOC work, the Equity Technical Assistance Group has been making arrangements with our community-based organizations to provide support to people needing assistance with quarantine and isolation. The houseless issues, we're working with Clackamas County because they're interested in potentially having 10 of our rooms at the Comfort Inn and Suites to use for isolation and quarantine, so we're working with them. We're also looking to support or to expand support to houseless to mitigate the risk at these camps. We have about 4 or 5 relatively large camps. Large camps to us is over 10, but we have some that are 25 and one that's been estimated to be around 40 homeless individuals. And so we're looking at all of the different options, non-congregate shelter, which is hotel voucher, also hotel vouchers, some kind of tent village. So we're really looking at all the options to try to move folks out of these really unregulated homeless shelter or homeless camps that are just popping up. We also, the OHSU Extension and Department of Agriculture are coordinating distribution of KN95 masks and hand sanitizers to agricultural workers. And Washington County, there's 45,000 KN95s that will be available for extension to pick up and distribute to the agricultural workers. So that's kind of what's happening out there to get us as close and as prepared for reopening on June 1st as we can be.
So on that last point, if an area farmer has crews that they're putting in the field, do they just need to contact the OSU Extension Service for that support, or who do they contact?
That is a good question. I'll have to get that for you. I know they're working with a lot of farm owners and as well as farm workers. They're also working with the Western Washington Farm Workers Association, but I don't actually know the number to call.
Well, I actually
might.
I don't need the contact information as long as they can find it on the county's COVID-19 website. I think that's the best resource.
I think it's on there for employers. If not, we'll make sure it is.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Commissioners, any questions or comments?
I have one. Marnie, you heard our earlier discussion regarding business opening. We all made passionate pleas to do that. What would move the dial to not give us a June 1st date so that we can all be prepared for the onslaught of calls should they happen?
So are you asking what would move the dial to
Yeah,
open
I'm not talking
earlier?
about the instance you're talking about, but what would move the dial so that they'd say, nope, we're not going to allow you to open because you've got too many cases? What would that take?
Oh, okay, the prerequisite. So, I believe that it would be increasing hospitalization numbers and increasing community-wide cases.
Can you quantify that?
The number? No. I don't know the
We're in
number.
good shape on those.
It sounds like, I just didn't know what would.
Right,
the
I
dial.
don't, I think it would be, I think that they're looking at a 2-week trend. And so I don't think that's gonna happen because it would be a 2-week trend. They'd have to say, well, we're gonna wait and see what happens over the next 2 weeks. Because in theory, they're looking backwards for 2 weeks and
That's
we're
why
met.
many of us have been asking folks, please don't let your guard down, please stay diligent. And now we're inside of that critical trend period, so it looks like, good, we're set up on that. We just had this last bit of contact tracers support and monitoring that was needed.
I mean, I think it's possible that they could apply their statistical method to the hospitalizations, but it's hard to get below 0. So I think we're in really good shape.
Single digits are really hard to argue about, aren't
Yes.
they? Anything else, commissioners?
Yeah, what are your thoughts about, on the one hand, I've been hearing consistently for some weeks that there's enough PPE at the hospitals and clinics, but then you see or hear testimony in the legislature and elsewhere that nurses and other people are saying that we're being forced to use masks and PPE for many more times than once, and question whether we really have the kind of ability to deal with the surge.
Yeah. So I think that, our data that's reported to the state and reported to the EOC documents that there is adequate PPE for current capacity. And the concern is that as the hospitals and healthcare industry opens up more and more services, will there, over time, be enough PPE, and then is there enough for surge? The certification that was required of hospitals is to certify that they had an adequate that they had a 30-day supply, which is that's a lot for a health system to maintain. They typically don't maintain 30-day supplies of anything, and so it's a big number for them. The other thing that I know is that, a couple weeks ago, and I haven't checked in a couple of weeks, they actually had an overabundance of PPE and were providing it to the EOC and asking us to distribute it to other organizations that needed PPE. So it's hard. I don't know. I see the same requests. I've seen the Nurses Association and others have, raised concerns. They've raised concerns with the governor's office. They've raised concerns in the media. The official documentation is what we see and what we're basing our decisions on, demonstrates there's adequate PPE, but I'm not in the hospital, I'm not on the floor.
So the information, is this information that comes from hospitals? Is that the source of the information that's sent on to the
Yes.
centers? Yeah.
Yes.
And is there some statement with reference to what those standards would be, and what does that mean?
So,
In terms of the rate of usage,
as they issue PPE, the hospitals are also reporting, and I don't actually know if it's daily anymore, but for a while it was a daily, what we called burn rate. So how many were they using each day? And then they could order more. And the standard, the prerequisite was that they had to certify that they had a 30-day supply for surge capacity need.
given a certain set burn rate?
Well, the burn rate, I'm sure helped. I mean, I think these are good questions for probably like Catherine Richter at the Health Preparedness Organization, because I don't know the details of what went into it. I know there was a standard that was set by the governor and by OHA, and that the hospital administrators had to attest that that standard was met. I could ask John Wheeler to get more details about what that standard, exactly what's behind that standard, because I just know the 30-day supply for surge capacity. But I can get more information from John Wheeler and get it back to you all.
How are we doing as far as testing? Are we increasing the amount of testing we're able to do in this
Yes,
area?
and it's actually by capacity, and we do meet that standard by the 30 per 10,000 per week. We have the capacity to meet that standard. We're not doing that right now because we don't have that kind of demand.
Commissioner Treese?
2 questions. One, have we learned anything from Clackamas's reopening that will help guide us in?
Too early.
Too early. And I'm really more thinking about the communication with businesses, those types of things that we might learn, not necessarily the spread of the disease.
Yeah.
And number two, do we know where Multnomah County is?
We do not know where Multnomah County is. They're sharing with us the same that we hear on the news, that, you know, they also are, continue to be concerned about enough contact tracers. They have more need for isolation and quarantine facility, and so they're still working on that. And they're still working on their plan for sort of hot spotting and assisting vulnerable populations.
Anything else? Jerry Willie, Commissioner Willie?
Yeah, this is fresh fruit season, and we all know that we really enjoy the fresh fruit that is grown and picked here. Should we be having some special precautions if we would buy that? I mean, is
We always.
fresh fruit, I mean, can it come with the fresh fruit?
So all of the information that I've seen has said that this isn't transmitted well through food, but we always recommend that you wash any fresh fruits or vegetables before you eat it.
What if you froze it? Does that work?
I actually don't know. That's
Sorry.
a good, no, that's.
Put you on the spot.
You guys are stumping me today.
I was just thinking this is strawberry season, and
Yes.
I haven't seen any fresh strawberries.
I'm looking
coming up
forward to
yet.
them.
Yeah.
But we always recommend that you wash your strawberries in particular, because strawberries are on the ground and E. coli can be a problem, and that's no fun either.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for
Thank
the
you.
update, and we look forward to the presentation tonight.
Yep, thank you.
Next, we'll move on to the legislative update. And I know we were sent a document, a draft of Washington County COVID-19 legislative principles. Recommended addendum. And oh, we have our full team that we can see here as well.
I was told not to touch the microphone again. Good afternoon, Board of Commissioners. I am Elizabeth Mazzara-Myers here as your Interim Government Relations Director. Oh, I see them over there. Hi, everybody. We have a very short update for you today. I wanted to just, before we move on to the principles that I sent, just remind you that last week we had a great regional meeting with the two other metro counties in the city of Portland to start a conversation about joining together for some federal lobbying. The next day, I got an email asking us to join a second regional meeting where we will work on some state priorities. That is, we're looking forward to working together that way. Of course, legislative days are happening right now. And as well, in the next 24 hours or so, the board and departments will get our official memo, which will launch our legislative concepts process. It will give you a rough timeline along with that worksheet. So we're looking forward to getting that started. I'll be scheduling with each of the board members and one of the GR teams. So if you have legislative concepts as an individual board member or as a team you want to bring forward, we'll help you work through that as well. So any questions about any of that? Great. So what we sent the end of last week, I had actually chatted with Steve about County Administrator Rhodes about whether we needed some official legislative principles around COVID-19. I reread the legislative agenda and guiding principles you all adopted a couple months ago. It felt like it fit in there. But looking at some of our sister jurisdictions, they had done some adoption, and it felt like it was better to have ourselves covered and ensure that we have clear direction. I don't think there's any real surprises here, and I wrote up what I like to call my bottom line. So if I were to give you one sentence, what would this be? And what I wrote was, using an equity lens to seek support, direct and otherwise, from state and federal government to ensure we are fully responding to COVID-19. So that's the goal of these. You've had a few days, so hopefully you've had a chance to look at them. I certainly won't read them out loud, but I want to see if there's any questions, if there's any place that's missing, anything you'd like to add, any edits, anything like that.
I just wanted to identify in the intro paragraph in the 5th line to the right, by losing a loved one. That's, and everything else I thought looked really rock solid in terms of supporting the needs of our community and leveraging the great legislative agenda lens that you and the team have been working from.
Right. We have had county council review this. We'll do one final read with him, and then I'll work with County Administrator Rhodes to get this before you so you can officially, I assume you'll need to vote on it to make it an addendum. That's all we have today.
Any other questions, thoughts?
I think just once again, we want to say thank you to the GR team. You're doing a great job, and yeah, we're happy to get these updates, and thank you for keeping us up to speed. But yeah, stay in the trenches.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you. So we're a little bit behind on time, and we have one last item, an executive session. Do the commissioners just want to plow through, or do you need a break? Okay,
Alan said 10 minutes. We're going to hold him to it.
so do we have a motion to move into executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub D?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. So I would ask any staff members who are not involved with this specific executive session to please leave the room.